point. And then this slide is trying to illustrate what we were trying to get across with this was that, understanding whose responsibility is it? And this really just came up for us over the holiday break. Um, we have learned that we need to get additional detail on our delegation forms as an example. So while we had documentation for who could sign off on our internal proposal forms, we didn't have a delegate named for someone who could sign off on IP terms. So luckily in our case, we were finally able to get a hold of the chair, but it identified a responsibility area that we didn't have a backup for, and we didn't define. It wasn't clear whose responsibility it was if the primary person wasn't there. So what I give that example just to illustrate how important it is to review and be familiar with the roles and responsibilities. And of course, at our institution, and maybe similar at yours, the PI is ultimately responsible for the direction and oversight of compliance, financial, personnel, and other aspects of the research project. So all the transactions are authorized by the PI or a delegate, and they need to have that direct scientific knowledge of the project being charged. But authorization can, often includes identifying this sponsored project. And we're going to touch on this a little bit when we get back to documentation. But from a larger perspective, the easiest way to make sure that the relationships that you're working together in the right way is to make sure that there's clarity around the roles and the responsibilities. So just making sure that those responsibilities are laid out and clear can address a lot of the problems and run into. Same thing with knowing, what responsibilities are outside of your scope. What don't you have the authority to make decisions on? So a lot of times when you're under a time constraint, it's tempting to be able to, you want to take the path of least resistance and just get it done. You may find yourself saying, well, could we get by with just the PI and the chair signing off on this cost sharing letter? Or do we really need the institutional official to sign? Or other times you may be faced with, no good options, and it's simply your job to give the person who has the decision-making authority and some sort of evaluation. So you might, the person making the decision may have something in mind, and it's your job just to weigh that decision against certain criteria. So you may weigh that decision against cross principles. Is it reasonable, applicable, allowable, consistently treated? Or, another example might be, as your job as the project manager, you may provide a list of options with pros and cons for each. And maybe none of them are the best, but at least you can provide a list of, here's what you could think about for each of these choices. And our role is simply to provide the options and the facts to help get that person with the authority to make that decision. So I think one thing that I took away that the reason why we put this quote on the slide too is that using information properly. So, I'm definitely guilty of, I feel like I have to prove that the decision that I am recommending, there's weight behind it. I may provide a link or whatever. It's like you have to show your reference material. But using, I think it's just goes along with ethically using the snippets that you choose to get the decision is also important in that regard.